Previously on Pugmire.
They have learned so much about the culture and history of man with these martial artists and these world shapers and these warriors and these priests, and how they have made birds with all of these sacred magical egg objects. You would see them as close to feral dogs. They growl, and their social interactions, I guess, are sort of like some of you.
Hey!
Careful.
Well, no, that checks out.
The lead badger steps forward and growls. At last, King Cluck's fresh sacrifices have come. And
I knew we shouldn't have trusted him.
You must understand that the badgers, they have studied man, and they have learned the truth of man, and that it is Bird that is superior. Bird is who is supposed to lord over us now.
I'm gonna look over at Cluckhold and go, it too?
Is an abomination to the code.
Yeah, let's not all assume that, we're just all chicken lovers. Some of us have, sworn off meat.
I throw a spear at him while he's orating.
Bob is so conflicted right now because he needs to protect the chickens. He doesn't trust the badgers, and he also feels like he needs to protect his friends.
I'm gonna shoot the shaman.
Okay.
But I didn't shoot the deputy.
Get off my page.
You subdue Taco. All the badgers are defeated. There is one who cannot escape, who's also blind. You tie him up for questioning so you can get to the bottom of this completely. For the sake of it, let's have Bob roll that intimidate check, or Gizmo roll that persuade check.
Where are we going? North.
Welcome to Dungeons and Dragons.
Therapeutic benefit in role-playing games. Welcome to Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh yeah, baby. Your presence requested in exchange for treasures.
Are we talking one treasure each?
Count that.
So I've got a +5 to intimidate. What about you there, Gizmo? For persuade.
I'm a 9.
+9 to persuade?
Oh, I'm sorry. Up to my bonus is +3. I thought you were asking me to roll a persuade.
Oh, all right. No. So I've got a +5 to intimidate. Do we want to do that? We want to intimidate them or try to persuade them to give us information? I'm thinking intimidate.
At this point,
Yeah, no, we need to
Alright.
put these badgers in their place.
Roll it up, Bob.
All right. That would be a non-nat 20.
Boom.
No.
All right. So Bob gets in his face and just unbridled rage, roars in his face. The badger quivers, mostly by the stench of his breath, but somewhat by. Oh wait, no, he's nose blind. He doesn't even realize that his nose is being assaulted by rancid breath. But he certainly hears the fear, and he feels the warmth of his breath. So the badger then spills everything. That Biscuit, the vizier who whispers in King Cluck's ear, made a pact, the Crimson Socks, who discovered this ancient labyrinth of man artifacts and history, and have interpreted it as thus that birds are supposed to be the new lords, that they left birds in their wake to rule over everybody else, and they protected all these different types of magical eggs, and found them to be sacred, and that's part of the evidence here. They offer, so as part of this deal, the vizier sends sacrifices to the badgers here, who have set up a sacrificial deal, and that empowers King Cluck to actually have magical powers. And so while he isn't while he doesn't really verbalize much, he's able to indicate things by pecking on parchment, and why the forest is so safe, why Chewton is so prosperous. It's not from any great leadership, It's from a cult pact.
It's from the Birds leadership. Come on.
And yeah.
Oh,
And this would be the exact type of information that Shadow would have requested of Gizmo. So at this point, I think we'll be winding it down, and the group has discovered much, and from here can choose what to do with the information, and we'll just kind of leave that as like a cliffhanger for any potential future games. But if they return to King Cluck as if nothing happened, then Biscuit will know that something happened to the cult, they weren't sacrificed, but that the group is dangerous and not to be meddled with. This information could be returned to Shadow, could go down the criminal faction route. You could also just kind of go down a third route where you don't return at all and you just take this info and maybe you start hunting down the cults elsewhere. Well, I don't know. So I know that
For option D, we take over for ourselves.
you want to take over.
We start a competing cult.
Yep, that's an option
That's
too.
an option.
Yeah, what feelings on what has occurred here?
Yeah.
are you talking about player wise, or
Yeah,
character
player.
wise?
Yeah, let's do player wise, and then we'll like call the session, and then do our like 4 questions, character, person breakdown.
Nope. Great hooks for the future as well. It was all in all, everything was great.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, and especially like the interpretation of Boston. You know, I mean, at least 4 of us in this particular show are from the area. So it's like we all kind of understand, like, you know, some of you guys, some people might not quite get all the puns and things like that. But if you're not sure about a lot of the cities and towns and stuff around people, Google a map of the surrounding area of Boston, and that might make more sense. But no, it was like Conrad always goes overboard with that stuff.
Yeah.
Whether it be NPCs or the the area or whatever. So it's, that was cool. But I mean, going back to like the characters as well, it's like it's not often am I playing a character that I didn't come up with, or I didn't have like I mean, not Tiny Frontiers. What did we just play? What was the game we just played?
RetroStar.
RetroStar.
Thank you. In RetroStar I did, but other than that, so far for Deeges, it's been pretty much whatever I've come up with. So it's kind of cool to like have to follow in that guide, if you will, of the character somebody else came up with. But it still was fun. Like I enjoyed it, and I think they did it. All of them did a great job coming up with these characters.
Yeah, I thought all the characters were really great.
Yeah, overall, my impressions were very similar to the other guys. I thought Conrad did a great job of pulling different story elements together. It was a lot of lore, but it was all very entertaining, and I liked all the NPCs we met. And I felt like there was a lot, a lot to do, because when role playing as it's kind of nice because everyone kind of understands how dogs think, or thinks they understand how dogs think, and it was fun to kind of think through a different lens as opposed to just thinking through like how human type creatures might respond or react in certain situations.
The concept of Pugmire is adorable in its own right, and I just love the fact that we're all just these anthropomorphic dog people.
I think I kind of touched on this a minute ago, but I really enjoyed interacting with everyone and kind of like through a different lens. Like I thought that it was really fun to think through how my character as a dog might respond, and also I thought this came up when we were going through the whole sports section of the dungeon. Thinking through the fact that we know and understand the world differently than other creatures, and so I had a lot of fun doing that and getting to role play sort of like an awe, or like role playing a misunderstanding intentionally, which forces you to think kind of outside of your usual patterns.
So I think at least for me, and I think this has kind of been a common theme so far, but I really like the setting of Pugmire. It's different. It's unique. I'm a dog guy. You guys saw my dog here at some point, playing with me, and he's trying to get me to get on the ground with him now. So, he wants to play, but I'm a dog guy. So this is a cool just game to play in general. Trying to, I think Billy said it, trying to think through the lens of a dog, and kind of just go along with that. But so I think that was probably what I liked the best about Pugmire. But then also I really enjoyed the character. I'm like, I'm the chicken guy. I gotta protect the chickens at all costs, and like that's that's just weird, but weird in like the greatest way possible. And like it's not something that you necessarily expect out of a character like this. Just chickens, like okay, why not? And then that kind of obviously worked into the story, and it made that experience a little bit different, which kind of I guess ties into like this something new thing, because like I will typically play a character that's always kind of goes along with the group, like whether it be something like Clink, where we have a shared mission, like a share. I forget what it's called. The creed in Clink, it's called the creed. The shared creed, even something like that. Or just what have you. I kind of always kind of go along with the group, but in this particular game, there was a lot of conflict there with Bob, because he's like, okay, I need to protect these chickens, but now like the chickens, they could be in charge, and like I want the chickens to be in charge, but I'm also a dog, and it gets a little confusing. So that's kind of the answer to both the try something new and what I liked about Pugmire.
The setting of Pugmire, I think, is one of the best aspects of it, because from my perspective, using this actively as a therapeutic, and I hope I don't dive too deep into that, but I guess it's like that it adds another layer to player safety. Lizard or a bird, it gives them kind of that other air of separation between the true self and the player identity of character. So I like that it also makes it very engaging for children. I think it also makes it very engaging for families who maybe aren't RPG savvy. Like people go, well, what the heck does a cleric do? Well, no, think what would a dog do? And, we've encouraged my dog would very much be like any food that isn't like nailed down to settings, but explore morality. What does a good dog, what does that mean? Especially if you're talking now, what does it mean to a kid versus a teen versus an adult? Even something as, obey the master. Well, what does that mean? There's so much depth in those little like 7 lines that you get out of the code. So I'd say those are the culture in the world, but specifically the code of man is probably my favorite aspect.
And I try to make sense. So I wanted to have that where like 2 of the characters were going to be like, wow, yeah, like what does it mean to be a good dog here? And that was like why I planned the final scene the way I did. So yeah, a little insight of that.
I don't think there was too much challenge. I'm pretty familiar with 5e, which this tends to looks like it takes a lot of inspiration from. So it kind of just everything clicked in pretty quickly for me.
I think it was challenging for me early on to get into my character a little bit. Like, when you're working with characters that are not. It's funny, like I said, like we all know a lot about dogs, or we think we know a lot about dogs, but like in terms of role playing, we're not used to role playing as dogs. We're used to role playing as bipedal, intelligent creatures, and so I found it difficult to try to balance the level of confidence and intelligence that my character had versus some of the challenges they were facing. I wanted to be helpful, but I didn't want my character to be super helpful. And I wanted it to feel as if a lot of my character's decisions, they were stumbled upon organically or accidentally, as opposed to like being very like what I'm trying to say, like planning everything out in advance.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Like a spontaneity.
Yeah, you definitely did that well. I felt
Cool,
like
thank you.
Gizmo was just like stumbling into stuff happening, but then like it working.
Probably, and again, anybody who's followed us knows that like I'm not really an RPG guy. I'm becoming one, but I haven't really been one like throughout my life. So I'm not really super familiar with the D&D rules and things like that. So it's kind of just like, even though there weren't a lot of necessary rules and things that we went into in the gameplay, just trying to remember certain things. I mean, like there was one point which I'm sure I'll probably cut out in the final edit, but like I'm like, do I subtract 1 wisdom at one point? And Tony's like, hey, look at your saving throws. And I'm like, I don't see them. So just rules and things like that. When do you get a game sort of like this? It's got a lot of that stuff going on. My ADD kicks in, and I'm like, meh.
I'll be honest. I don't. I think for some people, seeing Pugmire. Actually, no. It's an interesting question. I think for some folks, because I made kind of a joke before we started recording everything about, a kids group we ran where everybody was making butt sniffing jokes. So if I think that while it's very interesting, I think some people underestimate Pugmire in that it can be a very serious robust dramatic setting. So I think the one thing that might be difficult for some people is to not look at it as a very cartoonish property because of the fact that it's anthropomorphic dogs. They're just like, oh no, they're, like Monarchies of Maui. People make the joke about like, cats chasing laser pointers and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, but human tech isn't there. So where the hell would laser pointers come from? But okay. So I think that sometimes there is a temptation to be more silly about Pugmire. So diving into the depth of it can sometimes be a challenge, at least for myself. But then again, I like to take almost every character I play as comic relief. So, it's very rare that I've played like just given up trying to fight it.
Yeah,
to some degree.
That meshes very well with what we do.
Yeah, you fit right in.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
All right. How with this character were you able to explore something new with yourself?
I guess, like, no pun intended, Mackenzie was kind of a bitch, which was kind of fun.
Fortune.
I thought you said explore something new.
What?
I thought you said explore something new.
You're lucky we're social distancing.
Hi-oh.
Yeah, one thing I personally that I connected with my character is, I'm in real life, I'm a person who, I'm like a people pleaser. Like I want people to like me, and I want I encourage people to get along. So when I was role playing, I got to kind of role play myself a little bit in trying to find ways to keep, try to keep parties together, or try to like be a mediator to resolve conflicts instead of just like picking a side automatically. I got to bring a little of myself into that, which is like fun to explore.
Okay, and I think that answers the relate question too. So.
I'd say one of the things, kind of similar to, what Nate had said about like you're not really being used to playing, quote unquote, like a pre-gen. So I think the opportunity to explore not just what I wanted out of it. That's tough to say because in a lot of ways, I very much do believe in living free. The whole searching for my master, that kind of a thing. Not to sound weird or anything, but I don't really think I have a master. So that concept and playing up to that was a little foreign to me. I'm kind of like, not necessarily a carbon like, whatever, I do what I want. Like, it's not that ridiculous or nothing, but I think with identifying with the character, there was a lot about the character that I don't necessarily directly believe. So I was trying to, like, with the struggle of, whether to, follow through and what to do about the master, still not giving up on them. Like, I think there are aspects of myself that are very much aligned with that if, what's the phrase? You're always the villain in someone's narrative. I don't like that. So I don't like the idea that either someone may not like me or someone may not attune. Not that I have to agree wholeheartedly with everybody, but I think that exploration of the identity of master and what master means is a lot of depth for me to explore. Because like I said, I don't think I have a master. I believe, it's partially because of my Buddhist path. We are our own master. That's just me. So I would say that was a little challenging, trying to see how to play that. Whereas, normally it's okay. We're going to part ways here, and that's okay. As opposed to, but no, this is my master. So I have to so that I think would be the thing that was kind of exploring some areas for myself. If any of that made sense.
No, that made perfect sense.
Okay, good.
That was a great answer. Because like there are people who that's vital for them to seek a master and quote unquote master. I
don't know. I tried to give her a little bit of a snappiness, seeing how it's like she thought like all of her ideas were the best ideas for the most part. So I tried to kind of give that arrogance to her, and I guess I kind of relate to that a little bit. If I'm going to be honest with myself.
So Bob is very loyal to the chickens, especially, but very loyal in general. And I feel like that is that's kind of me. I'm to the people that I are in my life and I like and are worthy of my loyalty. They get it. So yeah, I feel like that was kind of a big thing related to. But at the same time, I could also be very I can also be really stubborn in my beliefs. So if I know I'm right, whether I'm right or wrong, but sometimes like I know I'm right. Like he knows the chickens are they're the best. And you'll argue for that, and it may not necessarily be the right thing. So that was definitely a parallel that I drew there as well.
I actually I have to go back on my other answer. I found the basic idea of Paris. Like I identified with the live freely. Um, Now the punish those who interfere, and not so much. I'm kind of a live and let die kind of a person. Like again, it not tapping too much into the zeitgeist, as it were. But I think that actually through the COVID experience, I've gotten very like before I was no man, but no, come on, you got to understand. Like look at it this way. COVID has kind of helped develop my ability to go. Yeah, you done, son. Later. Like, you got racist stuff? Bounce. And I would like, have notches on my gun belt of how many people I defriended on Facebook. People are like, well, that's horrible. It's an echo chamber. I'm like, no, it's not horrible at all. I get choose whatever I want. But I don't look at that as like punishing or like engaging those. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, no, I'm kind of okay if you don't like me. So ironically, the whole idea of all of that is something that I've kind of been silently working on during the pandemic, just going, yeah, you're a jerk, and I don't need to really hang around because I acknowledge what I don't like about you, and that's okay. So I don't know. That's more of what's on my mind, and that's how I read into the portrayal. Because I do identify with the fact that there were people in my life who I would consider to have been like masters. People who taught me about Buddhism, for example, and brought me into that, or people who introduced me to the role playing hobby that are no longer in my circle of friends. People that used to be a best friend, but now that's different, and that's difficult to kind of deal with that. But so that would have been something that I'd say was that struggle of who to keep, who not to keep, and how you make those determinations. That's probably something that I could see as being a relevant struggle that I was having.
So first, we want to take a moment to mention rescue groups. Now, they're mostly on a volunteer basis, doing it really out of love for the animals. So we here at DJs love animals. Heck, our entire
physically and mentally to pet animals. You have decreased blood pressure. Rescue groups
brought me Corbin.
And on to the next part. There's a famous psychologist by the name of Ivan Pavlov who accidentally discovered classical conditioning at the turn of the 20th century. Most people have heard the term Pavlov's dog, and if you have not, it refers to a study measuring saliva production in dogs. Now, Pavlov postulated that the presence of food would increase saliva production. He then noticed that the same level would occur with the footsteps of his assistant bringing the food, thus stumbling into scientific discovery. He then went on to introduce a metronome clicking alongside meals. Over time, the dogs began to recognize the metronome as eating time, and they would salivate, hearing the clicking despite no food being present. The reason I bring this up is because today we're going to be focused on anxiety, which has to do a lot with behavioral associations and treatment. But also in Pugmire, we roleplay as dogs. Pugmire is a game for nearly all ages, but is certainly around befitting teenagers. Nearly a third of adolescents experience anxiety annually.
So utilizing a game that can appeal to them with appropriate mechanics can help optimize the benefits. That's why for an extra layer of immersion, we use dog characters created by a middle school girls' anxiety group. There are a number of anxiety disorders, but many follow a similar pattern. So let us give you the clinical definition of generalized anxiety disorder outlined in the diagnostic manual. 1, the president. Anyway, 1, the presence of excessive anxiety and worry about a variety of topics, events, or activities. Worry occurs more often than not for at least 6 months and is clearly excessive.
2, the worry is experienced as very challenging to control. The worry in both adults and children may easily shift from one topic to another.
3, the anxiety and worry are accompanied by at least 3 of the following physical or cognitive symptoms. In children, only one of these symptoms is necessary for a diagnosis of GAD.
Edginess or restlessness, tiring easily, more fatigue than usual. Impaired concentration or feeling as though the mind goes blank. Irritability, which may or may not be observable to others. Increased muscle aches or soreness. And difficulty sleeping, due to trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, restlessness at night, or unsatisfying sleep. Notice the amount of bodily factors. There are plenty of treatment options out there, but the most commonly used and the most effective is with cognitive behavioral therapy. This is my own background. At its core, the connection between body and mind is used. Pavlov was a behaviorist. Over time, we had cognitive psychologists looking strictly at thought processes. Eventually, Aaron Beck combined the two and created a new approach. An oversimplification would be we use behavioral training to improve physical response and cognitive training to improve the mental response. The anxiety experience comes from an overreaction to stimuli. People can be born with a predisposition, like a more sensitive nervous system, higher heart rates, blood pressure, things like that. It can also be learned. Much like my example about Pavlov at the beginning, where pairing a metronome with food conditioned the dogs to think the clicking meant dinner was coming. When we avoid triggers that scare us, we are reinforcing the idea that they need to be avoided. We may break these thoughts down.
Say Conrad is deathly afraid of geckos. When he was 6, a gecko crawled across his foot. He was startled by this, fell down on a rock, and fractured his wrist. Now, this was a painful experience. His brain says, Conrad, don't do things that cause pain, and he gets nervous. Now, years later, a Geico commercial sends him screaming out of the room. Now, obviously, this is an overreaction.
When people have this excessive worry, it isn't necessarily driven by reason. So we begin to break down the thought process.
When asked directly what will happen to him if he's alone with a gecko and he really thinks about it, he starts off believing something extreme like, I'll die. How will that happen? It's not venomous. It doesn't have claws or fangs. It'll give him a heart attack.
This is where we start crossing into behavioral training. So I can't think of how the gecko will hurt me. It's my body that will hurt itself.
He feels his pulse rise. He feels hot, gets harder to breathe.
We start practicing breath control. Slow, deep breaths slow the pulse down. It becomes easier to think. That's a basic example of anxiety and a direct treatment approach. With our characters, it was interesting that we had overlapping themes built into the initial personality trait, worry over social lives. Pugmire allows for the ability to take a step away as dogs and act through them. We can see that it's okay to talk to others and we won't die from it. We can be ourselves without others denouncing us. The built-in code of man is a great means of establishing rules and boundaries, both in and out of game.
And a great example is at the bar subwoofer. It was just silly enough that we couldn't help but get into Barkioki in the games, and it was easy for the anxiety to just melt away. And I think that brings us to the end of our Pugmire series, guys. I hope you certainly enjoyed it. Stick around because next time we're going to be taking a look at a game called Mashed. If you remember the show MASH, which took place back in the Korean War in that MASH unit through early morning fog IC, you know, that show, you'll enjoy what we're about to have for you guys next week. So check us out. Follow us at Facebook at Deej Time, YouTube Deej Time, Twitter Deej Time. It's Deej Time, guys. Anywhere you look.